French eject till I get
Double or Nothing
visited.
In the solemn belief that the love of country which dwells in the hearts of free men occasionally needs rekindling, and to herald the advent of the 175th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is to be celebrated here in Philadelphia on the 4th of July of this year, WCAU transcribes this first in a series of 6 radio pilgrimages to those shrines of liberty in the Philadelphia area where the story of America all began. Freedom Revisited, with our special guest, Mr. James Stewart of Hollywood. Tonight, Valley Forge and Freedom Revisited. If one stands on the sacred grounds of this great shrine and raises his eyes to the arch above him, he will see graven into the stone these words.
If heroic deeds can consecrate a spot of earth, if the living be still sensible to the example of the dead, if courage be yet a common virtue, and patience in suffering be still honorable in your sight, if freedom be any longer precious, and faith in humanity be not banished from among you, if love of country still finds a refuge in the hearts of men, then take your shoes from off your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground.
I can't walk another step, Collie. This cursed ground's so hard.
Aye, it's fair cutting my feet to ribbons. I give my right arm for a pair of shoes.
Dream on, men. It's your feet you'll be given first to the surgeon for the lack of them.
Don't say that. I helped hold poor Armitage yesterday when they took his. It was horrible.
George was a good lad. I'll miss him, but not the stench of his rotting feet. I hope it's up and around he is before long.
I can't keep this up, Collie. Every step's like a stab of a knife.
You gotta keep it up, Ben. Anyway, we ain't far from the hut now.
You know what I'm going to do tonight, Collie? Just as soon as we have supper.
What?
I'm going to desert. I'm going home. I can't stand this no longer. As soon as we eat, I'm going home. Back to Jersey.
Keep your voice down, boy. You ain't going to desert. It's a death penalty if you get caught. But that ain't the important thing.
The important thing's not to get caught. To get out of here and get home.
No, it ain't, Ben. The important thing's to win this war. I reckon liberty is worth fighting for. My pappy came over to this country to be free. And I don't aim to let him down now. Think it over, boy.
Well, maybe you're right, Collie. I'll try to stick it out.
Sure you will, sure. You ask Armitage. He'll tell you I'm right.
Say, you think he'll get any better, Collie? He's a fine man. You think he'll get better?
Sure he will, sure. He ain't the first fella who lost his feet. Well, he'll be our hut.
It'll be good to get inside out of this wind. I hope the foraging squad finds some meat today.
Duck in quick, boy. You two ain't it. Come on.
Ain't no one else here yet.
You.
No one except poor old Armitage asleep on the bunk.
Hey, wake up, George. Has the foraging squad been back yet? Hey, George,
Wait a minute, Ben.
Collie, is he?
Yeah. George is all finished with this war. Maybe he's lucky.
Dead.
Lost too much blood, maybe. Or maybe the infection set in.
George is dead.
Don't take it too hard, boy. Soldiers die in camp as well as on the battlefield.
I wonder if George thinks it was worth it.
Hey, you
fellas hear the news?
Quiet, lad. We got a death in here.
A death?
Aye. It's good old George Armitage.
Huh? What did he die from?
He froze his feet. They took him off yesterday. Today we come in to find him dead in his bunk.
Oh, terrible. That's terrible.
Now then, what's the news?
It's about another death. Henry Short got his this afternoon.
What? We all knew him well. How did he die?
A farmer over by Wayne's headquarters shot him for stealing a chicken.
What?
Aye.
How do you like them farmers? First they starve us, now they shoot us. And it's for them we're here.
They don't appreciate that fact.
I'll say they don't. Well, they're no better off than some of those Tories down Philadelphia. Come on, men, get your muskets. Let's really rob them.
Don't be a fool. The provost marshal will get you before you set foot out of camp. Besides, those folks are just protecting their property, same as you'd do if you was them.
Same as I should be doing right now. Guarding my home over Jersey against Hal's redcoats instead of rotting away in this godforsaken hole. I ain't had a square meal in my belly a week. I ain't even got a pair of shoes to get out and get me some.
Hey, men, you hear that? The foraging squad's back. Well, Corporal, did you have a good day at the market? Are we dining on pheasant tonight?
Pheasant, get the fire going, lads. We're having stew.
Stew, where?
Show 'em, boys. 2 turnips, a tater, and an ear of corn.
For half a day's foraging by 4 able-bodied men and still has their feet. And they got 4 rotten vegetables to show for it.
And 12 starving men to eat them.
Let's get back to normal now, men. Some of you take poor George's body up to the burial ground. The rest of you see if you can find enough wood for a fire whilst I clean the tubers. Maybe we can make these vegetables taste like a stew.
Corporal, I'm not making any remarks about the vegetables you and the squad dug up for us. I suppose it's the best you could find, but how long can a man live on such fare?
A long time if you have to soldier. Doubt me not.
Yeah, but how long are we going to have to live like this? When will Congress send us food and clothing and fuel?
Only 3 minutes ago, I was talking to a courier, fresh out of Washington's headquarters. At this very minute, there's a solicitor from the Continental Congress talking to the general. He just came down from Lancaster. You know what the word is.
What?
The word is, we ain't gonna get nothing. Nothing, see? Nothing.
I'm going out and look for some firewood before it gets too dark, Corporal. I'll be back right soon. I gotta get out of here while I still have the strength. Gotta get home before it's too late. Got no shoes. Pretty soon I'll have frozen feet. Sure, I want to be free. But what good's liberty if I'm dead? I'm fed up with this army. Fed up with Valley Forge. It's home for me if I can get there without getting caught.
Oh, just a moment there.
I'm caught. It's an officer. I'm done for.
One more word before you leave. At your service, sir.
Oh, thank heavens. He's talking to that man on horseback. I'll sneak behind this bush here.
I cannot bring myself to let you go without one further attempt to impress you with our needs.
Sir, you have impressed me. The flood of urgent letters pleading for supplies for your men that you sent to the Congress have indeed impressed me. I'll do the best I can.
Well, I've heard that many times before, but I suppose you mean well. I appreciate your offer of personal assistance, but it's my men I worry about. Will they get through this awful winter?
I'll do my best, sir. And God be with you, General Washington. Up, lady. Here, come on. Here.
General Washington. He's coming this way. Oh, I hope he doesn't see me. Hey, what's he doing now? Down on his knees. He's on his knees in the snow.
Almighty God, we make our earnest prayer that thou wilt keep us in thy holy protection. Give us the strength to endure the many trials which here beset us. Endow us with the courage necessary to conquer the pangs of hunger, the bitter cold, and the black despair which threatens to engulf us all in this hour of travail. Teach us to accept suffering in thy name, that through humility and patience we may gain from this experience the fortitude and faith necessary to carry us to victory and freedom. Amen.
What a fool I've been. A selfish fool. If everybody felt the way I did, we'd always be under the British yoke. I guess if my kids and theirs aim to be free, they gotta help them now. Thank you. Thank you, General Washington, for showing me there's others to think of, for reminding me of God. Guess I'd forgotten all about fate. But, General, if you'll excuse me, I've got to get back to the hut. This is one Jersey man that's got a lot of fighting to do.
Some historians call Valley Forge the phoenix of the Revolution, for it truly was the low point of resistance to British arms, and from the ashes of its unbelievable privations and suffering, there rose a revitalized Continental Army which marched back to ultimate victory at Yorktown. There seems little doubt that stirring songs like Yankee Doodle would have long since passed into oblivion, outlawed by a tyrannical monarch, or discarded as not worth remembering by the descendants of a people who had tried and failed, had not Washington and his ragged Continentals ascended new heights in courage on the bleak, snow-covered slopes of Valley Forge. And what of Valley Forge now, 175 years later? The Valley Forge where men suffered and died, where they pondered the price of freedom and then paid it, where they put their fate in the hands of Almighty God, is today one of the most beautiful shrines in all America. Its 2,000 rolling acres in Pennsylvania's Montgomery and Chester counties are blanketed with rich grass, forested with 50,000 dogwood trees, thousands of other trees, glorious clumps of rhododendron, mountain laurel, and wild azalea. When Washington's men left there in June of 1778, Valley Forge was a scene of stark desolation. 75 to 100,000 trees had been consumed to provide shelter, build defensive works, and provide fuel. Valley Forge has been reforested, and it is a place of loveliness. Pilgrims come to Valley Forge from every state of the Union and many foreign countries, as many as 1.25 million in a single year. Some come to see the dogwood. Some come for picnics. Some come to get married at Washington Memorial Chapel. But most of them will listen to a conversation I had out there with L. Ralph Phillips, superintendent of Valley Forge Park. Mr. Phillips, what kind of reaction do you get from visitors to Valley Forge?
Well, we often have people say they think Valley Forge is sacred ground, and they think it should be looked on as such. Quite a number tell us when they approach the headquarters building, they stand in silent prayer in memory of the men who were here during that hard winter of 1777 and 78.
Well, Mr. Phillips, do you think that most of the visitors really do appreciate the price that was paid for our freedom?
Yes, I think the average visitor does, although there are some who look on the shrine as a place for amusement. But the greater majority do look upon Valley Forge as the birthplace of our freedom.
Visitors go out to Valley Forge to see many things, and certainly one of the greatest attractions is the beautiful Washington Memorial Chapel, often called the Shrine of the American People and the American Westminster. And here's the Reverend Dr. John Robbins Hart to tell us about it. Now, Dr. Hart, the chapel itself, I'm told it was inspired by Washington's prayer at Valley Forge. Could you explain that?
I believe that was very central in the thought of Dr. W. Herbert Burke, who was an Episcopal clergyman in Norristown, and said in his Sunday morning sermon one day, there should be a wayside chapel to commemorate General Washington and his heroic men at Valley Forge. And that very day, Dr. Burke began the work of building this chapel, beginning to raise the money, and he worked for 30 years, inspired, I think you were right, by Washington's prayer and spiritual life all through, he being a great church.
Well, Dr. Hart, your Sunday services are specially planned to remind us of our national heritage, aren't they?
Yes, the morning service is the church service and held mainly for the people who are communicant members, and we have a very loyal group, some of them coming a long distance to worship here regularly. In the afternoon at 3 o'clock every Sunday, there is a state service. Each state in the Union during the last 27 years having an annual service here at Valley Forge. We work with the governor's office of each state to secure speakers and music and to arrange things that represent in every way the entire state that we are commemorating on any particular Sunday.
Well, now, Dr. Hart, I understand a great many people like to get married here. What are the reasons for that, Dr. Hart?
Well, I think that we have had a variety of reasons for the popularity of the Washington Memorial Chapel as a place to be married. Interestingly enough, I just received a letter this week from a young man in Boston, who writes, many years ago as a boy, I sat in the chapel and was so filled with the spirit of it, I made a wish or expressed a desire to be able to be married right there in that beautiful little chapel. So, you see, he represents one of our coming weddings and has that great appreciation of the loveliness and beauty and dignity of the Washington Memorial Chapel.
One of the great attractions of Valley Forge Park is the chapel's Washington Memorial National Carillon, consisting of 49 bells, one for each state and one for the nation. Dr. Hart had them played especially for this broadcast. Listen. How do Valley Forge's pilgrims feel? What about the children who are visiting the shrine for the first time? Well, let's listen to this 13-year-old girl from Pottsville. Did you enjoy your visit to Valley Forge?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Why do you think it's wonderful?
Well, I don't know. I guess it's seeing where George Washington and his men lived, and how awful it must have been when they were there. So cold, and they were hungry, and I know I'm glad I don't have to live like that.
Well, do you have any idea of why you don't have to live like that?
Well, I guess it's because George Washington made such a good country for us.
And George Washington and others like him, and we have to keep it that way, you know. Now, let's see what this young fellow here has to say. What are you getting out of your visit to Valley Forge, Sonny?
Well, I like the cannon and the huts where George Washington's men stayed.
Well, anything else?
Well, the museum here. That's very interesting. The guns and all these pictures of George Washington.
Yes, but why do you think they've kept these cannon and these huts and this museum here? Now, why are they important?
Well, it's because this place is important. It's history. Well, if we didn't have George Washington, I guess we wouldn't be free today. Isn't that right?
Very, very right. Now, here's another little girl. What does Valley Forge mean to you?
Well, we've been studying about the revolution in school. I think it's wonderful to come out here and see all this.
Seeing where history was made, huh?
Yes, I guess it makes it mean so much more when you see it out here. Our teacher told us so much about how George Washington and the soldiers suffered. But it doesn't mean much unless you see a place like this yourself. I think Valley Forge means all our freedoms.
Valley Forge means all our freedoms. That's how a youngster looks at this hallowed campground. Well, how about the grown-ups? Listen to Mrs. Gordon Brown of Harrisburg.
Well, I came over here, and it was just perfectly beautiful riding down through the hills of the countryside. Trees and everything are just lovely. When I think of what George Washington went through when he was here in the bleak, cold winter, I think I realize just how fortunate we are that they were here and that they did what they did.
Mrs. Edgar Henderson of Canton, Ohio. Mrs. Henderson, what do you get out of a visit to Valley Forge?
I think it is well to remind ourselves from time to time of the price that was paid for our freedom, especially now that it is under attack. And Valley Forge certainly proves such a reminder.
And then there was Mrs. Henry Muller of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a frequent visitor to Valley Forge. Her married son lives nearby. Mrs. Muller, why do you come out to Valley Forge so often?
Well, because I love it.
And why do you love it?
Well, I can't really explain it, but, well, it's something inside of me.
Out at Valley Forge, I spied an Army captain. He told me his name was Robert E. Barry. His home was in Baldwin, Long Island, but he was presently living at Valley Forge Hospital because he had been in Korea to pay his share and our share of the price of freedom. I asked him why he was at Valley Forge Park, and he said,
I think it's imperative to every American, young and old, to better acquaint himself with the history of our country. We learn it out of textbooks in school, but until we actually get out and visit the scenes of our historic battles, we can't really appreciate what has been done and what will have to be done in the future.
Then I asked Captain Barry if he saw any parallel between Valley Forge and Korea.
Well, the name Valley Forge always comes through to me the bitter suffering of the Continental Army, particularly the hardships of the cold weather, and we did have that situation in Korea.
So I observed that we still have our Valley Forges, and Captain Barry commented,
I think there's no way to fight a war without Valley Forges.
And so my pilgrimage to Valley Forge reminded me not only of what the Founding Fathers endured for us, but of what the servicemen of today are enduring to preserve our freedom, the shrines of which we are now revisiting. Is there something special for each of us in this radio pilgrimage to Valley Forge? I think so. And I think you will agree with the reason expressed by the distinguished American actor, Mr. James Stewart.
These are stirring days in our nation's history. Once again, as so many times before, we stand at the crossroads facing a great crisis. But none of the extremities that we have met and conquered in the past 175 years can compare with the awful menace of communism. For not only is the peace of the world again threatened by the most tremendous army ever brought under arms, but it is also menaced by the most gigantic conspiracy ever conceived by the minds of men. This is a colossal boring from within, a murderous, godless assault on our sacred traditions, which hold that man is free and that the state is a society of free men, a government of, by, and for the people. Even though they who broadcast the seeds of communism are creating a society in which man is no more than a slave to the state, the movement grows. And so it is that, like the Minutemen of Lexington and Concord, we must all take up arms against the common foe. And there are many, many ways to join actively in this war against communism. We must all be Americans in everything the name implies, responsible citizens, proud of our birthrights and living the rich life of freedom, justice, and equality, with faith in Almighty and pride in our sacred heritages. We can listen to programs like this. We can tell our friends and neighbors about them, urge them to listen. And we can revisit freedom, make a pilgrimage to those hallowed places like the rolling, peaceful slope of Valley Forge, where the story of America all began. And we can take inspiration from what we see and feel. And thus strengthened, we can face the future confident that this nation under God shall not perish from the earth.
And now, as we end our pilgrimage to the holy ground of Valley Forge, let us repeat the words of Henry Armit Brown, inscribed on the Washington Memorial Arch, cut deep into the stone so that generation after generation may read them.
And here in this place of sacrifice, in this vale of humiliation, in the valley of the shadow of that death, out of which the life of America rose regenerate and free, let us believe with an abiding faith that to them union will seem as dear, and liberty as sweet, and progress as glorious as they were to our fathers and are to you and me. And that the institutions which have made us happy, preserved by the virtue of our children, shall bless the remotest generation of the time to come.
You have been listening to Freedom Revisited. This evening, WCAU made a transcribed visit to Washington's winter encampment at Valley Forge. These programs are produced by Joseph Connolly, written and directed by Jack Charest, and narrated by Charles Shaw. The dramatic readings were done by Harry K. Smith. Music was by David Stevens. Our guest this evening was Mr. James Stewart of Hollywood. We hope that you'll join us again next week at this same time when WCAU again presents Freedom Revisited with a pilgrimage to Christ Church. This is Bill Hart speaking.
All roads in American Briar's fresh strawberry ice cream. Ask for hand-dipped pints and quarts or Briar's Thrifty half-gallon.
If freedom be any longer precious, if love of country still finds a refuge in the hearts of men, then take your shoes from off your feet. for the place on which you stand is holy ground.
WCAU presents Freedom Revisited. In the solemn belief that the love of country which dwells in the hearts of free men occasionally needs rekindling, and to herald the advent of the 175th anniversary of the adopting of the Declaration of Independence, which is to be celebrated here in Philadelphia on the 4th of July of this year, WCAU transcribes this second radio pilgrimage to one of the great national shrines of liberty in the Philadelphia area, where the story of America all began. Charles Shaw will be heard with our special guest, Mr. Ralph Bellamy of Hollywood. Tonight, Christ Church and Freedom Revisited.
Christ Church, where the founding fathers of our nation worshiped, where the architects of the Declaration of Independence and the Revolution came to commune with the Almighty, where they sought guidance and inspiration to meet the great trials of the moment. Christ Church, symbol of man's abiding faith in the justice of God. Christ Church, unchanged through 200 years of change, still lifting its lofty white Georgian spire to the blue heavens above, attesting today, as it did then, to the truth of those immortal words of Thomas Jefferson: "The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time."
There is much about Christ Church that is glorious legend, but somehow the heart and soul of Christ Church seem to be in the bells. The bells are the voice of the church, and the bells are the voice of the people. The bells ring to tell the time of day. They ring for birth, for marriage, for death. They call the people into worship. They sound a greeting to our holidays, and their giant tongues ring out alarm.
They do indeed. 175 years ago, this was a vital function. Our enemies feared the bells, for they knew that through them, our freedom-loving, our liberty-seeking ancestors could be called to muster for a strong defense. Whenever possible, our enemies destroyed our bells. In the year 1777, the English Lord Howe hated the bells. He and his staff sat in the kitchen of a captured American farm along the Brandywine and laid their plans for the further conquest of the colony.
I drink to chance fort, sir. Another victory for British arms.
To that I drink with pleasure, sir, but then I suggest you've had enough.
As you say, my Lord Howe, it's just my exuberance. By gad, sir, under your inspired leadership, we have the rebels on the run at last.
Here. The Colonel is most flattering. But mark you, sir, we must not become too confident. The memory of Princeton is still fresh in my mind.
Your lordship is wise, but with your permission, sir, one final toast. To the speedy fall of Philadelphia and the end of the rebellion.
Let us drink to that, Colonel, when the fact is accomplished. Now, proceed with the council.
Allow me to drive home the cork in this flask, Lord Howe.
By all means, Major. And now those maps of Philadelphia, if you please.
Philadelphia. Most of us look forward to that campaign, sir.
How so?
Why, it'd be a lark, sir. The town's peppered with Tories. Many of us have friends there. And to speak the truth, Lord Howe, we feel our drive on Philadelphia will be less a battle and more a social engagement.
Let me disillusion you, gentlemen. It will not be a lark. General Washington is an antagonist worthy of the finest steel. But I would like to take Philadelphia for more reasons than one. There are those bells.
The bells, sir?
Yes, by gad, those bells.
the bells of Christ Church. Those bells, together with that infernal instrument in the State House, proclaimed the signing of that diabolical document called the Declaration of Independence. They have proclaimed rebel victories. They have summoned the rebels to arms. I want those bells as much as I want all of Philadelphia. I want to ring those bells myself. Ring them day and night to proclaim the victory of British arms. I want those rebels to hate those bells, to regard them as the symbol of humiliation. And when I have rung those bells to the torment of the rebels, I shall tear them from their cradles and melt them down. Melt them into bullets to be fired against the ragged remnant of those who would defy His gracious majesty.
Yes, Lord Howe hated the bells, and well he might. Those bells were a mighty symbol to the patriots of Philadelphia. What were those patriots doing about those bells? Let us see. It is September 14th, 1777. The time is evening, and in the eastern sky hangs a huge, round harvest moon. There's a cool nip of fall in the air, and one of the men, clinging motionless on the ladder, high in the belfry of Christ Church, trembles slightly as he waits. Just above his head are the booted feet of another waiting man, and just below him is the head of yet another. As the men hold themselves there in the middle of black space, they listen to the small sounds coming from above them.
Sounds like nearly ripped my finger off.
Have patience, Henry. Have quiet, too.
Hear the man talk. Have patience and quiet, he says, and me is like to have my hand torn off. I'm close to going after this lock with me teeth, I am.
Give him a hand, Will. They'll hear us sure if we don't get into the belfry soon.
Move over a bit, Henry. Put the tool in once more, and we'll both heave on it now. Let's go.
There she be. Lift her up, Will.
Come on, men, and be quick about it. But be quiet.
Oh, thank heavens. There's some moonlight up here.
That there is, but let me shut this trap. Now, who has the lantern?
Here you be, Will. I'll crack it open a bit and shine it around. Look at that. I ain't never seen them before. The bells of Christ Church.
8 of them. And every one a fine, big beauty.
Well, let's get to work. Our job is to measure them and figure out how best to get them to the ground. It's not going to be an easy job. Even if we could do the work in daylight with lots of help, it wouldn't be easy. The way it is, we have to figure to sneak them out. You might even say we have to figure to steal them. Aye. It's going to be a mighty job. It'll take a bit of doing, but it seems to me if we took out this here center beam, some of the shoring,
Roger. Quiet, man. I hear something below.
Handle off, thieves. This blunderbuss will kill every man of you in the squeeze of his finger.
Who are you, friend?
I'm the sexton of this church, and I'm no friend of yours. It's off to jail with a lot of you.
I was afraid this might happen. Take the hood off the lantern and come up through that trapdoor, Sexton. Here's something for you to read.
I warn you, I'll not hesitate to shoot. Your voice is familiar. What's your name?
I'm Will Hughes, and a good member of this church. Here, Sexton, read this paper.
Hold the light better. Now then, what is this nonsense? We, the undersigned, do on this 12th day of September, to the... Why, is a written order to remove the bells from Christ Church.
Aye, man, and observe the signature.
The Executive Council of Pennsylvania, signed by Timothy Matlack, Secretary. This is unbelievable.
And what's more, Sexton, this order is issued in consequence of a recommendation of Congress. It was our hope we'd get the bells out before the church knew what was going on.
But why, man?
Well, there are some mighty powerful Tory voices in the church. We wanted to take the bells into safekeeping without having to fight the church. Now, it looks like a fight all the way.
This is most disturbing. I must inform the rector immediately. I must inform the rector.
Here comes trouble, I will.
They'll give us a fight, never doubt it. But let me tell you this. With a fight or without it, the bells of Christ Church will come down to be hid.
The next day was September 16th, and the rector of Christ Church, the Reverend Jacob Duché, hurried off to the State House for a meeting with Mr. John Penn and several members of Congress. The good Dr. Duché was wroth and damp with perspiration as he strode into the legislative chambers and bearded the lawmakers.
Gentlemen, what is the meaning of this business of the bells?
Dr. Duché, please be seated, sir.
Plague take this seat, sir. Will you explain about the bells?
We have heard that your sexton has acute ears.
Or that your thieves have heavy feet?
No matter, Doctor. The entire incident is to be regretted. In brief, the Continental Congress has recommended the taking down of all the bells in the city to prevent their falling into the British hands in the event the British take this city, as we fear they will.
But, my dear Mr. Penn and gentlemen, the bells of Christ Church are a work of art. The man who hung these bells in our tower was the man who made them. He came with them from London on the good ship Myrtilla, long since departed. Where in all of America will we find another person capable of hanging these bells properly if they're taken down now?
I dare say, Doctor, that it would be easier to hang the bells back in the tower than to replace them if the British melt them down.
This is poppycock, sir. The British will not destroy the bells of Christ Church.
Most of us feel that is a moot question, sir.
I demand, Mr. Penn, in the name of my vestry, that the bells be not removed from the church.
We shall see what can be done, sir. We shall see what can be done.
And then came a day early in November. It was a gray day, cold and gusty. And in the street in front of Christ Church stood a large covered dray. Hitched to it were 4 strong horses. Men had been working feverishly, and the crowd had gathered. But now the job was finished. Will Hughes stands behind the wagon, lost in thought, till a familiar voice sounds at his elbow.
A good day to you, Will.
Oh, greetings, Roger.
You seem deeply lost in thought.
Suppose I am. This is a moment of some importance, Roger. We're taking away the bells. Would you like to see them?
Oh, I would indeed.
Here, I'll lift this for you. Look in.
Zounds, this wagon is full of bells.
2 from St. Peter's Church, 1 big one from the State House, and 7 bells from Christ Church.
Oh, the town will indeed seem hollow and empty without its bells.
Yes. Philadelphia won't be the same without them. But then the British are coming, and for a long time the town can't be the same to those of us who love freedom. There's nothing now we can do save join the Continental forces under Washington and fight. I'll tell you something, friend. These bells will now lie hidden in a secret place. They'll lie hidden while you and I fight. And they may lie hidden for a long time, but there'll be a day when the bells will be brought back. They'll be brought back to hang on high and sing their song of freedom and liberty, not only throughout Philadelphia, but over the length and breadth of all America. You and I'll have to do it, Roger. You and I and others like it. We'll have to do it for our sons and daughters to come, for all the Americans to follow after us. Yes, we'll have to bring the bells back to sing their song of freedom throughout the land.
The bells were brought back. And today, amid the noise of traffic and the other sounds of a busy city, the bells ring out each day at noon, summoning Philadelphians to the faith of their fathers, faith for today.
It was here in Philadelphia that William Penn declared, "That nation which is not governed by God will be ruled by tyrants." And here in Philadelphia, man's dependence on God has been attested to from the days of this country's beginning. At Valley Forge, George Washington prayed for strength and guidance. At Independence Hall, our founding fathers asserted their firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. Wherever you go in historic Philadelphia and its environs, you find strong evidence of our forebears' abiding faith in God. And nowhere is that evidence stronger than Christ Church, the 200-year-old shrine of freedom on 2nd Street between Market and Arch, which we are revisiting this week. Our other shrines are now museums, but Christ Church is still the same today as it was 200 years ago, as it has been every single day of its existence, a house of worship, a living link between the challenges of the present and the struggles of the past. When you enter Christ Church, you meld with history. You become one of the great company of the faithful, with George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Betsy Ross, John Adams, Robert Morris, and Lafayette. Today, none of us can lead a continental army like Washington. We cannot negotiate an alliance with France like Franklin. We cannot sew the first flag like Betsy Ross. But we can place our knees upon the very spots where those heroes and heroines of the Revolution knelt in humble prayer before the same Almighty. And we can mingle our prayers with theirs, echoing the very same petitions, prayers for the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Here to tell us about Christ Church and its significance is Mr. Charles B. Mitchell, curator of this sacred shrine.
The chief historical significance of this building is that it has been used constantly for church services since it was constructed, like the one previous to it, founded in 1695.
And how old is the present building, Mr. Mitchell?
The present building was completed around 1754.
Now, are there any special historical features of this building itself?
Yes, there are many. Some of them we call furnishings. For instance, the pulpit was finished here in the pre-revolutionary days and installed in 1770, one of the finest examples of the wine glass pulpit known today in the country. The chandelier over the central aisle is British made and was hung in 1749 and once provided all the illumination for the center body of the church. The baptismal font in the head aisle of the church is over 300 years old, was used in England before it was brought over here and installed in 1697.
And there's quite a story about the bells of Christ Church, isn't there?
Yes, there is. The bells and the tower in which they are hung were only completed with the assistance of Benjamin Franklin, who ran 2 lotteries, netting £1,500 each time for the purpose of completing a bell tower and buying the bells. They were bought and ordered in England, cast there in about 1751, and hung in the tower here in 1754. They have rung for many important occasions, including the day of 4th of July, 1776, and then for historic occasions since that time.
And, among your early communicants here were some of our very famous revolutionary heroes, is that correct?
That's correct. If we were to read the roll call of the pew holders of, say, 1770, we would come across the names of all the famous men of Philadelphia, or at least most of them.
And these men felt that they could not govern alone.
That's correct. They were positive of it, and even such a man as Benjamin Franklin, who was notorious for his broad viewpoints, was the man who determined that the Continental Congress should not proceed without prayers, which were conducted by one of the ministers of this church.
Mr. Mitchell, you have quite a few people come here to visit Christ Church, I assume.
Yes, we have tremendous numbers in the course of the year.
And what is the principal reaction you notice among the visitors here?
Well, the reaction is split, as it always is. Some are just curiosity seekers, wanting to see where George sat and to sit there themselves. Others come with a vague glimmer of what this church stood for in its day, and behind that what the men stood for that worshipped here. They seem to have the greatest appreciation of the building and what it represented to those men and what it represents to us today.
Mr. Mitchell, this is part of a broadcast called Freedom Revisited. And I think that here at Christ Church we have a shrine to one of the greatest, or probably the greatest, freedom of all, freedom of religion.
Yes, without it, all the rest of our freedoms would be rather meaningless and probably non-existent.
How do the children who are visiting Christ Church for the first time feel? Listen to this group of pupils from the McCall School. First, 9-year-old Mary Fay of 630 Spruce Street.
Well, I think it's very fortunate for us to have freedom and to go to our own churches in any other country. I think we're about the luckiest one to have like that.
Well, that is mighty fine, and thank you very much. What's your name, fellow?
Lawrence Fay,
And how old are you, Lawrence?
10,
And where do you live?
329 Pine Street.
And what are you getting out of your visit?
Well, I think it's wonderful that so many famous people came to this church.
And why do you think it's wonderful that famous people would come to a church?
Well, to worship.
And you think it's wonderful that even the biggest people in our nation will come to church and kneel down before God, huh?
Yes, I do.
Well, thank you very much. Now, here's a young fellow back here. What's your name?
Nicholas Ranieri,
And Nicholas, how old are you?
12,
And where do you live, Nicholas?
244 Delancey Street.
Well, now, what does Christ Church mean to you, Nicholas?
Well, Christ Church means to me that people could come here and worship as they want, and as the man outside was saying before, that if you were over in Russia and you walked into a church and knelt down to pray, you might get into a lot of trouble.
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas. And now, little girl, what's your name?
Leonora Del Rio.
And how old are you, Leonora?
I'm 10.
Where do you live?
716 South 2nd Street.
Now, how do you feel about seeing the places where all these important people worship?
Well, it was a great thrill to see where George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Betsy Ross, and all of them sat. Well, I just can't imagine that I ever seen them.
Really? And you can imagine what it must have been like back in the old days when they came in here to pray, huh?
Yes, it must have been. Oh, I just wouldn't know. This has been worse than we have. We have it very nice and comfortable, but they must have had it just bad.
Would you advise all your little friends to come here and see Christ Church?
Oh, I would.
Children, now grown up, come back to Christ Church for a restoration of their spirit. Typical of the comment you'll hear from the adult visitors are these remarks from Miss Elizabeth Quay of 5741 Lansdowne Avenue.
Well, to me, Christ Church is one of the nation's shrines. It has been founded by the early people of America because they were convinced that God endowed men with the inalienable right to be free, which represents one of the four great freedoms, the freedom of religion.
Well, Miss Quay, do you think that we can get any real value out of revisiting these shrines?
I think by revisiting these shrines, we are meeting one of America's basic needs, which is a renewal of the spiritual foundations on which our freedom is based.
When you worship in Christ Church, you can't help feel the presence of the invisible congregation of the early patriots who kneel in spirit beside you and seem to echo the prayer and praise of the visible congregation.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be.
World without end. Amen.
The past and the present, together in Christ Church.
Faith of our fathers living still, in spite of dungeon, fire, and sword. Oh, how our hearts beat high with joy whene'er we hear that glorious word. Faith of our fathers, oh,
And now it is our pleasure to bring to our WCAU microphone one of the outstanding stars of stage and screen, Mr. Ralph Bellamy.
Does the mantle of liberty rest too lightly on your shoulders? Like most of us, are you beginning to realize that complacency is a luxury that free men can ill afford in this iron-curtained world? Perhaps you recognize that this wonderful kind of freedom we enjoy is not ours to do with as we will. We're but custodians for a time of a way of life that is the envy of the civilized world. A democracy where the dignity of man and the rights of the individual are supreme. We hold in sacred trust the destiny of a great nation, and we must not place it in jeopardy through carelessness or neglect. Ours is an awesome responsibility. Let us therefore resolve in this 175th year of our independence to re-examine this priceless heritage that is ours to watch over and keep safe. Through a renewed interest in citizenship in the affairs of our town, city, and nation, let us reassure those gallant Americans who have gone before us and the countless generations to follow that these United States, aware and alert, shall ever be a bastion of strength in a troubled world. Let us begin by revisiting our sacred shrines where liberty's story was unfolded. On the holy ground of places like Christ Church, untold inspiration awaits us for the task ahead. Revisit freedom and retard the spread of communism. Then see how snugly the mantle of liberty rests on our shoulders.
Thank you, Mr. Bellamy. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Freedom Revisited. Freedom Revisited is a radio pilgrimage made each week at this time to one of the great historical shrines here in the Philadelphia area. This evening, WCAU made a transcribed visit to Christ Church here in the heart of our community. These programs are produced by Joseph Conley, written and directed by Jack Charrett, with commentary and narration by Charles Shaw, and music by David Stevens. Our special guest this evening was Ralph Bellamy. Next week at this time, Freedom Revisited will take you to the Betsy Ross house. Bill Hart speaking.
For your own security, for your country's, invest regularly in United States defense bonds. Your money is safe. Your future is safe when the American way of life is guaranteed. For every $3 you invest in United States defense bonds today, Uncle Sam returns to you $4 on maturity in 10 years. Take advantage of the automatic, systematic ways to buy bonds. The payroll savings plan where you work, the bond-a-month plan where you bank. For America's security, buy United States defense bonds. From our country, we expect the benefits of freedom, the advantages of a common defense. Now your country asks your help to keep it strong. Buy United States defense bonds. Buy as many as you can.
WCAU, AM and FM, Philadelphia. Daylight time, 10:30. Here's your Valley Forge Beer baseball scoreboard. The final score, the Phillies 7, the Cards 3. The A's and Chicago game has been postponed. Now, that's the way we like them, Phils. And if you like beer...
Knit your brow about, Doctor. I'm sure we'll work out everything to the satisfaction of all.
The easy, casual way Conrad Overton brings up, then dismisses the matter of his own voice in the management of Wheelock, does not escape Jim's notice. There is something odd in Overton's manner. And for Jim, the feeling of apprehension and suspicion he has had before has been intensified.
Now's the time to tell our friends what we found out about Crisco for frying, Ron.
Well, that's easy, Ruth, and a pleasure besides. Friends, it's just this. You don't know how good fried foods can be till you've had them fried in Crisco. Just switch to pure all-vegetable Crisco and follow the tender, crisp frying guide printed on every Crisco label. That's Crisco's way, the only sure way to turn out delicious, digestible fried foods. Watch Crisco form a crisp, tender crust on the outside of food you're frying. Taste the moist goodness inside. So good and so digestible, you'll see why 9 doctors in 10 say Crisco fried foods are easy to digest. Crisco's the finest quality shortening money can buy. So get the 3-pound size, saves you money, you know, and start frying with Crisco. Remember, the foods you fry taste better and they're digestible when you're cooking with the one and only Crisco. Be sure to listen tomorrow to another absorbing episode of The Road of Life, brought to you by Pure All-Vegetable Crisco. Now, this is Ron Rawson.
And Ruth Rawson.
Reminding you,
they're cooking with Crisco, from New York to Frisco. Pies are so flaky, shakes are so light. Fried foods digestible with Crisco, they're right. So keep on cooking with Crisco.
Gildersleeve has a surprise for you. Listen tonight on NBC.
NBC for Trenton, WTTM. It's 3:30 and Tetley tea time. When your husband comes home tired from work, perk him up with a cup of Tetley tea. It's extra stimulating, delicious. Get Tetley, Tetley, packaged